This video is sponsored by Surfshark. On Monday, October 18th, the Walt Disney Corporation announced they were altering their 2022 release schedule. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was pushed back a month and a half from March 25th to May 6th. As the MCU movies have to be released in a certain order, the remaining MCU releases were therefore similarly pushed back like a chain of dominoes. There was, however, one major outlier. The as-of-yet untitled Indiana Jones sequel was pushed back not by a couple of months, but by a full year, from the summer of 2022 to the summer of 2023. Unlike the MCU delays, this Indiana Jones delay is indicative of both major production trouble on the movie itself, as well as a severe corporate schism and reshuffle behind the scenes of Lucasfilm and Disney. Hence, the Indiana Jones delay cannot be fully appreciated in isolation, as it is merely a piece in a larger game of corporate Game of Thrones. We will provide the full context and corporate shenanigans behind this delay. In order to do so, we will begin this video by going through the players and competing interests involved. With that established, we can examine the Star Wars connection and then go through the battle over not just the direction of Indiana Jones, but of Disney as a whole. So strap in and make sure you watch until the end of the video, for we are about to take a deep dive in real-life Disney corporate drama and political maneuvering far more compelling than anything Disney has put on screen for many years. The events and corporate power play now manifesting themselves in the production of Indiana Jones are the culmination of years of Star Wars mismanagement. This mismanagement caused each subsequent installment of the sequel trilogy to earn less than the previous one, merchandise sales to plummet, and lest we forget, the firing of Gina Carano caused many to cancel their Disney Plus accounts and take to the high seas instead. Please note that this is something neither Midnight's Edge, our sponsors, nor any other affiliates condones. Not only is piracy wrong, but you're exposing yourselves to endless spyware, tracking software, and other malware out there on the high seas. And that's on top of all the data that is stolen from you, all from your regular browsing. Well, modern problems require modern solutions, and many of them can be found in a VPN, such as the one delivered by this channel sponsor, Surfshark. A VPN, or Virtual Private Network, is a privacy protection tool which guarantees instant online safety and encrypts all data sent via the internet. On top of that, Surfshark allows you to bypass geo-blocking restrictions by changing the country you access the internet from, which also gives you access to 15 different Netflix libraries by simply changing your virtual location. Not only that, outside of the US, Star, the international version of Hulu, comes bundled with Disney Plus. If you're in the US and change your location to, say, the UK, well, then you just might get that too. One of the advantages with Surfshark over many other VPN providers is that it allows one account to be used on unlimited devices. That's part of the reason why Surfshark is the VPN of our choice, and it gets even better. If you type in the code MIDNIGHT when ordering, that triggers an exclusive offer in which you now get 83% off the normal list price, plus 3 extra months for free. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Do check out the link in the description below for further details and to order. With that said, let's get back to the people whose internal strifes have culminated in the events now transpiring behind the scenes of Indiana Jones. In order to fully appreciate what is happening with Indiana Jones, we have to go back to 2005, when Bob Iger first succeeded Michael Eisner as the CEO of the Walt Disney Corporation. In his book, The Ride of a Lifetime, Bob Iger details how he recognized that during the latter Eisner years, Disney had grown stale. The company lived off its former glory and had no recent or new properties that created excitement or could bring the company forward. Iger attributed Disney's rut in part to the excessive bureaucracy under then CEO Eisner, where the creatives and division leaders had to traverse multiple layers of red tape and number cruncher approvals before they were able to proceed with any project and any new idea. He felt this stifled creativity and caused Disney to lose the talent that could push them forward. As soon as he took over the company, Iger removed all these levels of bureaucracy and red tape and instead gave all power to creatives, or more accurately, he gave all power to division leaders. Their creatives, in turn, answered to them. Not only that, to ensure talented division leaders stayed, he also locked them in for the long term with multi-year contracts unparalleled within the industry. Take note of this, as it'll be important later on. In order to expand Disney's product line, Iger also acquired, among others, Pixar, Marvel, and later on, Lucasfilm. For many years, Iger's strategy worked like a charm, and Disney went from strength to strength. But strategy is a moving goal, and it has to change as times change. Case in point, for the first half of Eisner's reign, his strategies too had been successful. But when the surrounding marketplace changed, it took Iger's strategy of giving all power to division heads to bring Disney out of the rut. What Iger had not taken into account, though, was what if, in another marketplace change, the very division heads he had made all-powerful themselves would become the problem. Kathleen Kennedy came with the package when Disney acquired Lucasfilm, and due to her association with Frank Marshall and Steven Spielberg, she is part of the Hollywood royalty and one of the power players in the industry. On paper, she is one of the greatest producers of all time, and so she too was awarded one of Iger's ironclad division leader contracts. Alas, Kennedy's vision for Star Wars wasn't furthering the brand so much as it was exploiting it in order to further an ideo-political agenda that Kennedy herself is a fervent believer in. If a division head at most any other film studio had decided to use company assets as a platform for political activism and underperformed as badly relative to expectations as Lucasfilm did under Kathleen Kennedy, they would have been let go. But due to Iger's strategy for making studio heads near autonomous, there were no mechanism in place to stop her, especially not since she was a woman and part of the untouchable Hollywood royalty at that. Contractual issues aside, the optics of Bob Iger removing Kathleen Kennedy were such that she was in effect unfireable. The best Iger could do to mitigate the damage was to appoint Jon Favreau to set up a new course for Star Wars on Disney Plus with The Mandalorian, while Kathleen Kennedy was sidelined with the High Republic Publishing Initiative, her Accolade Disney Plus series, and the Rian Johnson trilogy that will never happen. As expected, the High Republic failed with audiences, while Favreau's The Mandalorian was a huge hit, creating new excitement and bringing back old fans, all while promising to deliver an MCU-inspired pocket Star Wars universe. However, as Lucasfilm division head, Kathleen Kennedy still had influence, and so fired Gina Carano, one of the load-bearing pillars of Favreau's Star Wars. Doing so not only delivered a crippling blow to Favreau's long-term plans, it undid a large part of the goodwill among fans The Mandalorian had created. But in doing so, Kennedy overstepped her mark and provided her new boss, Bob Chapek, with the impetus needed to take drastic action. Like Michael Eisner before him, the early years of Bob Iger's tenure as Disney CEO were a resounding success. The latter years, less so. The acquisition of Lucasfilm had not worked out anywhere near as well as planned. The incredibly expensive acquisition of Fox put Disney in an extra precarious state. Bob Chapek had come from the Parks division, where he was not overtly popular. Known as a penny pincher, while he may not have been all that popular with those who reported to him, his focus on profits and efficiency at every turn was very popular with key shareholders and the board of directors who wanted Disney to become a for-profit company again. While the detailed machinations remains unknown to the public, it would appear that it was Disney's board of directors that appointed Bob Chapek to succeed Bob Iger. More to the point, we've heard persistent rumors suggesting that Chapek was expected to make divisions made unprofitable by unfireable division leaders with activist leanings profitable again, even if those divisions were run by Hollywood royalty. However, Bob Chapek was not given favorable conditions to do this job. Unlike with previous changes of management, Iger was still with Disney, serving as executive chairman, overlooking Chapek's every move. When the pandemic hit, Iger temporarily maneuvered himself back into the position of CEO, a move which humiliated Chapek, and which caused many to wonder if Iger had ever wanted to give up the role as CEO in the first place. If Chapek was to succeed, he would have to do so by political maneuvering, beating his opponents in 4D chess at the corporate Game of Thrones. When Chapek eventually reassumed the CEO position, Forbes, a financial publication read by all Disney shareholders, major investors, and corporate enemies, publicly held him responsible for the firing of Gina Carano. The article published March 11th of this year was titled, "Disney's firing of Gina Carano is confusing and hypocritical, lacking sound management." The article held Chapek accountable for all the issues facing Disney that everyone knows Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy were directly responsible for. There were multiple layers to this article, which we broke down with writer, producer, and former journalist Cameron Pasha, so do check out our earlier coverage for even more details of the implications. But to make a long story short, this article provided Chapek with the justification to the Hollywood elite that he go directly up against them, as it was now his job on the line, and that he did. Chapeks Countermeasure was first revealed to the world by Variety in a May 12th piece titled "Disney's New World Order Leads to Confusion and Bruised Egos." Here, it was revealed that Chapek's reorganization of Disney had caused a lot of hurt and resentment among those who enjoyed great power and autonomy under Iger's rule. Remember, Iger would hire studio heads like Kevin Feige and Kathleen Kennedy on multi-year contracts, and then he gave them near complete autonomy to run their division as they liked. These Iger policies were at an end. What Chapek did was take power away from division heads like Feige and Kennedy, and instead give it back to the distribution and merchandise divisions. Had Chapek's rule been in place at the time, Kathleen Kennedy couldn't have fired Gina Carano on a whim, not without checking with merchandise if they were cool with her firing their hottest selling toy. Likewise, had Chapek's rule been in place at the time, Kevin Feige would not have been free to greenlight some of the more dubious upcoming MCU movies we're getting, not without clearing it with distribution first. And if a given division head's project doesn't perform, the end of long-term contracts meant they could be shown the door already the next year. Previously successful division heads like Kevin Feige were not exempt. In many ways, Chapek's restructuring undid Iger's streamlining and brought Disney back to the red tape of the Michael Eisner era. Although, to be clear, a very different kind of red tape. Many were critical of Chapek when this was first announced. But keep in mind that distribution and merchandise in turn are driven by audience and consumer behavior. In a roundabout way, giving power to distribution and merchandise is giving power back to the audience. By doing such a company-wide restructuring, Bob Chapek by all accounts succeeded where Bob Iger had failed, in fully wresting Star Wars away from Kathleen Kennedy. In the July issue of The Atlantic, one of the publications which informs the Hollywood incumbents which opinions are acceptable to have and to express, one of the featured stories was titled "How Disney Mismanaged the Star Wars Franchise." This article informed Hollywood that it's now okay to admit the sequel trilogy had been a misstep, and that the future of Star Wars lie with Jon Favreau's The Mandalorian. This article signaled that while some battles may remain, the proverbial war for the future of Star Wars was over, and Kathleen Kennedy had not come out on top. For the remainder of her Lucasfilm contract, Kathleen Kennedy would direct her attention not towards Star Wars, but towards Indiana Jones. And just hang in there for a little while longer while we're about to get to Indiana Jones. But before we get there though, it is important to note that in doing his restructuring which empowered the audience, Bob Chapek had painted a goal on his back. To many in the Hollywood establishment, suddenly answering to the very same audience they are accustomed to speaking down to is a very scary notion. Implementing Chapek's changes could take a couple of years, and until they are fully implemented at all levels, there will be heavy resistance, as those who have enjoyed significant power will not be stripped of it without a fight. In an August 10th smallscreen.co.uk article titled "Disney in Turmoil, Creators Are Not Happy with Bob Chapek," it stated that there's a lot of infighting between Chapek and his team, who has the shareholders on their side, mostly, and the creators, the people at Pixar, Marvel Studios, Walt Disney Animation Studios, and now also 20th Century Fox. That is significant, because as long as the majority of the shareholders are behind Chapek, he is winning. The only way to turn that balance is to use the media to portray Chapek as a villain, in the hopes of turning more shareholders against him. That is what the Scarlett Johansson lawsuit was all about. The earlier Variety piece stated, Hollywood dealmakers noted that the new structure at Disney is Byzantine and more convoluted than necessary, adding an extra managerial layer into the process of getting projects made. One of those dealmakers who disapprove of Chapek's reorganization would be Brian Lord, CAA head honcho and Scarlett Johansson's agent. It was implied that under Chapek's rule, back-end deals would have to be reformed as well, and that cuts directly into the dealmaker's bottom line. When Scarlett Johansson sued Disney, not Marvel, whom she is under contract with, but Disney, over breach of contract over the day and date Disney Plus release of Black Widow, that was, in all likelihood, an overt attempt at vilifying Bob Chapek in the eyes of the shareholders, in the hopes of turning the tide against Chapek. Normally, such a situation would have been resolved by Lord giving Marvel's Kevin Feige a phone call saying Scarlett wanted more money, and Feige, if need be, having Chapek sign off on him wiring her some. And that would have been the end of that. Foregoing any such measure and going straight for a civil suit against Disney and Bob Chapek implies it was never about the money, but about someone trying to get rid of the person threatening their power. In the aftermath of Shang-Chi, proving that Disney did nothing wrong in releasing Black Widow day and date on Disney+, the lawsuit ended with being settled out of court, Scarlett praising Disney, and Kevin Feige for the first time commenting on Bob Chapek, saying he was underestimated. Meanwhile, production had ramped up on Indiana Jones, and rumors had started surfacing that Kathleen Kennedy's contract, which is set to expire this year, might be renewed. However, we never got the confirmation that it actually had been renewed, and now we might know why. Let us now shift our attention back to Indiana Jones. That is a property Kathleen Kennedy is contractually locked in with, and unlike Star Wars, she actually has history with Indiana Jones, dating back to Raiders of the Lost Ark, when she first started working with Steven Spielberg. This Indiana Jones movie, however, is the first one Kathleen Kennedy alone is fully in charge of, and it's also the first one not to be directed by Steven Spielberg, or to be co-written by George Lucas. Neither of them have spoken out, but that neither have any involvement beyond the purely ceremonial, while they have taken on other responsibilities elsewhere, does not come across as any kind of ringing endorsement of the direction Kathleen Kennedy is moving the story in, quite the contrary. Over the past 6 months, there have been a number of story leaks, both on Twitter and Reddit, our good friend and future ruler of the earth Doomcock, as well as the Daily Mail, Digital Spy, and other publications that Lucasfilm's marketing department have no sway over. All of these leaks suggest that Kathleen Kennedy is about to do to Indiana Jones what she already did for Star Wars. We are about to go through those leaks, and though we cannot vouch for their accuracy, please be aware that we are about to reveal possible spoilers for the in-development Indiana Jones. So, if you don't want them, skip ahead to the next chapter.
Here it comes.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge of Fleabag and activist droid from Solo, A Star Wars Story fame, plays a prominent role as a British journalist who aids the aging Indiana Jones on a quest to stop German scientists working for NASA from going back in time and altering history so that Germany wins World War II. Due to time-traveling shenanigans, we meet up with a deep-faked younger World War II or even pre-World War II era Indiana Jones, and towards the end of the movie, he is killed. This causes the elder Indiana Jones to be blinked out of existence, as Back to the Future rules of time travel apply. Indiana Jones is now dead, erased from history in this new timeline. But in order for history to be saved, Phoebe Waller-Bridge steps up, becomes the new Indiana Jones, does his adventures in his place, and takes over his place in history. And reportedly, the adventures of the new and improved female Indiana Jones will be continued on Disney+. It may be tempting to dismiss that leak as a hoax, but before one does, consider the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Over the course of 3 movies, Rey Palpatine, a brunette, classy-passing British Kathleen Kennedy self-insert, usurped all of the OG caricatures. She took over Han Solo's ship and friend, she took over Leia's abilities by way of training, not that she needed any, and finally, she appropriated the name Skywalker, despite having no legal or familial claim to it. Along the way, she even declared that she was all the Jedi. By the end, this new Skywalker had usurped everything that was Star Wars. That may read like a hoax too, but this is what happened in the sequel trilogy, and in spirit, it does sound quite similar to these alleged Indiana Jones leaks, right down to the brunette, classy-passing British Kathleen Kennedy self-insert. This allegedly is what Kathleen Kennedy wants for the Indiana Jones franchise, to replace Harrison Ford with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. With that, let us get back to why this movie has just been pushed back by a full year. We are now about to dive into rumor territory, as the information we are about to reveal at this point in time cannot be independently verified. This information then comes from alleged insiders who claim familiarity with the situation and who have reached out to us with their observations. While these do fit an external reading of the situation, None of these claims can be attributed to a published article or named source, and must therefore be treated as rumor, and taken with a recommended dose of sodium intake. With that health warning out of the way, let's dive into what our sources had to say. Kathleen Kennedy's standing in Hollywood had allegedly taken quite the tumble, as even if she remains respected and powerful, she has not had any luck in finding another job as an executive at another studio. Everyone she reached out to seems to have some excuse for why they can't hire her, and so Kathleen Kennedy is not ready to give up her role as head of Lucasfilm. Hence, Chapek was able to wrestle Star Wars away from her, in return for her doubling down on Indiana Jones and having her contract extend to see it through. Chapek was obviously aware of Kennedy's plans for Indiana Jones, but being busy with the squashing down the Marvel rebellion materialized through the Black Widow lawsuit, he agreed to let her have her way with Indiana Jones.
Yes, sir. Come on, squeal.
Hey, phrasing!
And to later on, once the Marvel dust settled, extend her contract until the movie was released. This was when the rumors that Kathleen Kennedy would be renewed appeared. However, in an unprecedented coincidence, just as the Black Widow situation had settled, just as Kevin Feige for at least a moment bent the knee and kissed the Chapek ring, more detailed story leaks started appearing when publications like the Daily Mail and others that Lucasfilm have no sway over. These leaks, and the negative fan response to them, of course reached the major shareholders and board members that Bob Chapek answers to. They didn't care what agreement he had with Kennedy. This had to be stopped. They would not stand for a repeat of what happened with Indiana Jones here, and Chapek was instructed to see that it did not. This then gave Chapek a valid reason to go up against the Hollywood royalty again and take Indiana Jones from Kathleen Kennedy as well, after already having taken Star Wars. While Harrison Ford's health is an issue and has caused delays already, the allegedly real reason for pushing back the movie by a full year, something the entertainment media complex by and large accepted without asking questions, is to retool the movie. Last we heard, Kathleen Kennedy's contract extension had not been signed, and if it has to be signed, that requires a certain level of cooperation in the retooling of Indiana Jones. How it will be retooled, we cannot say at this juncture, but the delay of a year suggests the retooling may be extensive. This story is not over, and there are bound to be more attempts at taking down Chapek, as his actions aren't just changing Disney, they're stripping the Hollywood elite of their power. They will not let that go unchallenged. We will keep you up to date as this progresses. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe so you don't miss any updates. For now, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And remember that to help bypass quarrelsome geo-blocking restrictions and to protect your data, you should get Surfshark VPN. Use our code MIDNIGHT to get 83% off plus 3 extra months for free. Link is in the description.